Hello there, everyone, and welcome once again to One Idea Away. For those of you that might be new or recent followers, for those that maybe just kind of tuned in midstream and haven't heard some of the background, most of this show was really born out of my work as the president, still am the president of the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, IPEC, which is one of the world's renowned coach training and certification institutes. There was a decision that was made 20 years ago when we started that we didn't want to only have a coaching model that focused on achievement and skill development and progress and those aspects. It certainly includes those things. But the basis of our model was always around the growth of awareness and consciousness and how those things enabled us to achieve and to accomplish and communicate and relate at a very different level. So what that means is that the conversations that we very often get into are how is it that we can better understand ourselves? How is it we can better understand those things that maybe inhibit our awareness or limit our consciousness in any capacity, which is why we explore mindfulness and positive psychology and the latest science and research, whether it's out of neuroscience or other fields of psychology, all those types of things to help us figure out how we can live our best life and do so from the very essence and core of who we really truly are. And so today we're really kind of in great shape because we're going to bring together a lot of these conversations that we have. So we talk about things like awareness, we talk about acceptance, we talk about the commitments that we make, we draw on science, we draw on research, we draw on personal stories, we draw on all of these types of things. And today we've got a guest who actually has the ability to speak to all of that, meaning he's one of those incredible guests that we have that has the expertise, renowned expertise at that, but also the personal experience that goes along with it. Because this is a method and what it is that he's here to talk to us about is something he truly has lived through his life, not just as his life work as well. And so with that, I'm really looking forward to today's conversation because we are going to be chatting with Dr. Stephen C. Hayes. Dr. Hayes is a professor of psychology at the University of Nevada. He's an author of, check this, 44 books. That's right, 44 books, over 600 scientific articles as well. He's especially known for his work, specifically on acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT as it is very well known. It's one of the most widely used and researched acceptance and mindfulness-based methods of psychological intervention. It is used not only in psychology, but it's also used in coaching. It's used in organizational training, leadership, performance, all across the board that research has been done on this now. His popular book is Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life, which has sold over 300,000 copies worldwide, and for a time was even the best-selling self-help book in the United States. Dr. Hayes has received several national awards, such as the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Association of Behavioral and Cognitive Therapy, and is ranked among the most cited psychologists in the world. And so much of his driver behind all of this is to help alleviate human suffering, which is just an absolute beautiful aspect of this. Dr. Hayes, Steve, thank you so much for joining us here on One Idea Way.
Awesome to be here with you, Luke. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Excellent. I think maybe the place to begin, which I very much like to do with a lot of our guests, is a little bit more on the personal background of what led to this, the field, the discovery, the expertise that you're now involved in. And I know for you, it was some 35 years ago. And interestingly enough, your journey into the work you do today began with a panic disorder. And I was wondering if you could share a bit of kind of what was going on at that time and what began the journey to the professional realizations and insight and wisdom that you've created.
Yeah, professionally, I'm a psychotherapy developer and a researcher in language and cognition, but where I began was in work on behavior therapy, behavior analysis, cognitive therapy, and was doing kind of routine work, trying to develop things that would help people with anxiety, depression, whatever. And as a young assistant professor, developed a panic disorder that gradually started taking away more and more of my ability to function to the point where giving a lecture to 5 undergraduates was really hard. I had to show them films or do something else that would keep me from having to talk with them because I would be so overwhelmed I literally couldn't make sound come out of my mouth. And I did all of the logical, reasonable, sensible, and pathological things that anyone does when they're faced with that, which is I was trying to run away from it or make it go away, find the magic eraser that would eliminate the anxiety without looking further into even what it meant you know, what it was about, etc. And I tell that story on a TEDx talk. People can easily search it and look at it, where I finally hit bottom, where I thought I was having a heart attack and then realized I was just having another panic attack. And something inside me just sort of said enough is enough. And instead of running, I sort of made a life oath. I found myself at, you know, two in the morning saying out loud to no one, you can make me hurt and you can make me suffer, but you can't make me turn away from my own experience. You can't do it. Mm. And who I was talking to is the dictator within. We've all got that voice. Sometimes voices, you know, the little argument of like the cartoon version of, you know, Goofy with the horns and Goofy with the halo. And even 3-year-olds understand that metaphor, because they're already, by the time they're in our language community to that level, they're already aware that there's different voices. And that kind of dominant dictator voice, I think most people understand, the one that wags fingers and, you know, is cracking the whip and telling you you'll only be okay when, and you'll never be okay because, and after all you have, and we'll make this long list of faults and things that you're ashamed of and feel badly about or afraid of or whatever. Yeah. And I literally stood up from that carpet knowing that my life had changed. You know, the promise I made as I stood up is never again. You know, and so that put me on a journey. That was in 1981.
Right.
So do the math. You know, we're not at 40 years, but we're getting dang close. And you know, and it's something that I work with every single day. But what we ran out and did a couple quick randomized trials, which is what, you know, geeky, researchy types do. We did 3 of them. I did one in weight control, one in pain, and one in depression. In each case, compared it to best of breed, the best I could find out there. Even sent my first doctoral student up to work with Tim Beck, Aaron Beck, the father of cognitive therapy, so that he could really be well trained and we could compare the depression trial to best of breed CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, and what we'd come up with. And we only published one of them. I don't publish it so that student could get a job. And the other 2 came out, and they came out really well. And the other 2 came out really well too, but I put them in a file drawer because it seemed to me that it wasn't so important to say, hey, you know, some of the things that are in the wisdom traditions, that are in Eastern traditions, this mindfulness, awareness, acceptance kind of stuff. I mean, I recognized the move I was making. I could see it in the human potential movement. I could see it in the, you know, Esalen and you know, the stuff that any hippie was exposed to in terms of, you know, Eastern thought and so forth. You're looking at, I don't have the hair anymore, but you're looking at a former long hair who sat on Hippie Hill in the summer of love. So, you know, I knew about those things, but man, the scientists were not really on them. That was spooky, kind of out there. People did it. And the reason I put that stuff in the file drawer is I wanted to be able to speak in a way that you just set up. I wanted to be able to come on a program like this and say, what are the processes of change that liberate or enchain human beings? And, you know, for 15 years, we didn't publish outcome trials. We just worked on processes. What are the processes of change? What predicts your life going into the toilet or headed up? And we came up with a small set, and you've mentioned most of them. And we came up with measures on them and how to do the research on them. So we realized that these things go together. The concept we put forward is called psychological flexibility. Mm-hmm. And it's a collection of 6 processes that, or the smallest set that will do more than any other set I know of in behavioral science. That dog just hunts. You know, it does a really good job of predicting whether or not you're headed towards prosperity or headed towards despair.
Let me ask you then, because so a handful of things. For everybody listening, we're going to get into some of those processes that liberate, and talk a lot of it, you know, about that flexibility, that psychological flexibility of what those are. There's something before we get to that I wanted to ask you. You used in your story of getting to that moment where you say just never again, right? There's a lot of people that are out there that have made that statement of never again, and it happened again. Right? And it comes back and it comes back and it comes back. And so I'm just kind of curious, in what you have found through this line of study and worked and what has become ACT and everything else, I'm curious almost like, what did you find within this set of processes or understanding different from what other fields may have found that
Well,
enabled that never again?
yeah, and I think it was, thank you for catching that, because I'm
Yeah.
sure it would be easily misunderstood to say, never again will I have a panic attack.
Right.
Never again will I struggle, or will I have a high levels of anxiety. No, in fact, I had panic attacks from that moment, 1981. I think my last one was in 1995.
Yeah.
So I'm almost 14 years into the ACT work. I have videos of me giving workshops, like one in 1986 at the University of Washington, sitting on my shelf back here with a whole bunch of really well-known psychologists there. And you can see me sort of stop and stumble and come back. And I know I'm right on the edge of a panic attack at those moments. But the difference was never again will I turn against me. I am not gonna say that my own experience, my own emotions, my own memories, my own bodily sensations, my own thoughts are my enemy. That's just bull. That's the part of you that is categorizing your whole life into what you want and what you don't want, and saying you're only going to have sugar soup for lunch. And it's not true. Things happen to people, and think about it. Is there any negative emotion you can name that you don't pay good money to produce? You go to movies that are scary or that are sad. You buy the novels. So what are we talking about when we get into this mindy idea, that there's no place within us for anxiety, for sadness, for depression? No, there's room within us for all that. The issue is it taking too much of our time and attention? And can we keep our eye on the ball? Can we focus on what we're willing to produce in our life, which can actually be fostered by that? Like I tell the story in that TED talk, that first one, that TEDx, of being 2 or 3 years into doing ACT trainings and finding myself in front of an audience. Now we had done those randomized trials and only published one of them, but now we're getting into the process stuff. We know that we're on something. We know that this is important. I'm already starting to talk to the clinicians and scientists because I want them to start doing the research with me. And now it's a vast community. I mean, our society has 8,200 people in it. There's 27 chapters around the world. There's over 3,000 studies on ACT and the processes underneath it. But at the time, it was me and 4 students. It was a tiny little group. But I'm given this workshop, and I suddenly feel like I'm going to cry. I go, what? And I tell the story in the TED thing of then catching. I said, oh, I don't have time for that mentally. And I go on my workshop. The next workshop, same thing happens. And I catch that I feel very young. And that night in the hotel, I literally go back and say, well, what was going on there with that sadness? And I catch me under my bed listening to my mom and dad fight. And I'm afraid literally it's going to come to fists. It's going to come to violence. Because my dad was an alcoholic. There was just domestic violence and abuse in the home. They're both loving, wonderful people, but they just didn't know how to get it out of their own way. And they're at each other, just rah, 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 rah. And I'm hiding under my bed. And I'm thinking, I'm going to do something. And then I realized it's not safe. I can't get out from my belly that bad. I might get punched. I saw my older brother, actually get between them once and almost get punched. Well, here's my point. Anxiety sometimes has meaning. And my first panic attack was watching the full professors fight in a psychology department meeting. Well, you look back at it and I say, I've made this promise to myself. I'm going to do something. I became a psychologist. I kind of even forgot why I became it. I couldn't, if you said, was there violence in the home? I'd say, yeah. But would you say, was that really central to you? I said, no, that was, no, it was central, but I had so laden it over because it was so overwhelming the way it was programmed originally. I had to go back and walk through that out of just kindness to myself. So the never again was, never again will I make myself my own enemy. I'm going to stand with me. the deep me, the true me, the whole me, not the little cartoon me, the mask I put on, the personality, the show, the clothes I wear. I mean, the word personality comes from persona, which is a Greek word for mask. It was the ones who used these clay masks in the Greek theater.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a cartoon. I don't want to be a mask face with myself. No, the whole of me is welcome. And so that was the promise. Never again will I make myself and my experience my own enemy. And if you make that turn, you make that pivot, you take that energy, which is connected to so many basic human energies, like the yearning to belong, to contribute, to feel, and instead you put that energy, that yearning towards being the whole person you are in consciousness, connected with whole people around you in consciousness, you now instantly belong. You don't have to put on a mask to belong. Yeah. You don't have to earn your right to be here. It's a freaking birthright. Yeah. And it's only this little chattering monkey mind within that doesn't get it yet. Yeah. But it can be brought to heel. You can put your mind on a leash and show up and live as a whole human being without having to subtract and delete from your own experience.
There's one thing I want to just pull out, because there's so much great stuff there. One thing that you slipped in there, and I just don't want this to go by anybody, because it's a topic that does come up every now and again, is this idea of masks. And what I just heard and what you just said, which I think is so critically important, is that so often we end up wearing masks to belong to a community, to a group, or to otherwise. But so much of that mask is not because of the mask that we wear for others, but it's because of the mask that we put on and wear for ourselves, because we are in some way making ourselves our own enemy, or aspects of who we are our own enemy.
You betcha. And we're going to wear clothes. We're going to we're going to shave in the morning. Yeah. We're going to have a conversation here where I'm going to do the very best to present my ideas. Do I have a thought that, I have this little, even if these days I have these little thoughts, and then I'm just trying to be here. And a little bit of it, you could say, is a kind of a mask, a performance, etc. But it's there for communication, for doing something. You adopt a persona to do something. I mean, it's a perfectly fine thing to be a leader and to put yourself in a role of being a leader, and to not have to buy into that as if it's a second skin that that's hiding what's underneath.
Yeah.
As you step into that, and as you kind of essentially let go of the attachment to the persona, well, then you can be more flexible with yourself. And different times and different places, different things are required, and keep true to what you're really trying to produce there. Right. Liberate yourself to bring your full human abilities. And it's the attachment to it that really interferes with your ability to be a leader, to be effective, to live a whole life. So the mask is not bad. We always got a mask. We got a persona. We got something. It's buying into it, grabbing onto it, saying that's me, and then turning anything that contradicts it into something you have to fight. Do you know, Luke, that you lie? The average person lies every 1 to 6 conversations. They have a little white lie. And if you look at why the lie happens, like, I only slept 5.5 hours last night. Dude, you slept 6. Why did you say 5.5?
Yep.
Well, because it means I'm special. See, I'm able to function even when I'm tired, or I'm especially needy. Help me. So whether it's a positive or a negative, but if you then track, do you want to have a conversation with that person you just lied to? There's a significant reduction in your interest in having another conversation with that person that you just did this little thing to build yourself up in front of them.
Yeah.
So and it isn't just that you're going to be found out or something. It's not like that. You feel the disconnection. You feel the inauthenticity. You sense it. You're tracking it. Try to go a couple of days without a single freaking lie, not one. Yeah. Not one exaggeration, not one unnecessary withhold,
no embellishment.
And you will find that's really hard. There's habits that are just in there, and it's worth letting go of. I mean, there's times, of course, you don't say, how do I like my dress? Oh, it's horrible. Now there's times not to but be careful, because if you buy into what's underneath that, you're protecting a persona, not you.
Yeah.
And that gap between the whole you, the genuine you, and that presentation you put out there will begin to torture you and, mock you as you sort of hollow out. And if people want me, if they like me, it's only because they believe the bull I put out.
Yeah.
Who would want to be loved by fools? Who would want to have conversations with people who are just kind of easily manipulated? So you get yourself into a point where you can't connect, you can't belong, because you're doing the things that tell you you have to do in order to belong. That's ridiculous. That's not worth our life energy. It's human, I understand it, but enough is enough.
How do we then use, so, because I think the point, many points again, but this point about the way in which disconnection ends up getting created, and how it can be just these little tiny things that are standing in between us from truly, genuinely, authentically, completely transparently, perhaps showing up with another human being in the way that we also then do that with ourselves. It creates these little points of disconnection. Again, another topic that just constantly comes up on the show. I'm curious because that word acceptance is a really, really, really big word that is misunderstood in every which direction, depending on which crowd you want to walk into. And so help us understand this point of acceptance and then commitment. And then let's get into the psychological flexibility processes.
Yeah.
Because I think it's so crucial for people.
It's really key,
connecting again.
Because part of what, this yearning to belong, et cetera, and then you put on a false face, you're afraid if you're seen that you'll be put to the side. And, that acceptance piece is linked. It's in even the name of the work that I do, acceptance and commitment training, when I'm working with business industries, et cetera, acceptance and commitment therapy. But it's really the same basic set of 6 flexibility processes. That acceptance piece comes from a Latin root, which means to receive, the septare part of acceptance. But the original connotation or denotation was to receive, as if to receive a gift. And we still have it in English. If you have something that's really kind of sweet and precious to you, and you give it to somebody, you might say, here, will you accept this? You don't mean, would you tolerate this? Would you resign yourself to this? Would you put up with this? What the mind tells you is acceptance is some kind of heavy burden you just have to carry because you don't have any choices. No, the acceptance is to receive the gift that's offered. For example, let's take something like a sense that there's something frightening happening here, something scary that's happening here. The lack of acceptance, when we create measures of it, the single most common measure, or single most powerful measure, there's others, depression, et cetera, that are way up there, but one that's way up there, almost to the point where people think it's the same concept, is alexithymia. It's not knowing what you feel. And here's why. If you're not willing to receive the gift that's offered, the gift of what? The gift of feeling. That is what? It's your past showing up in the present. Yeah. It's telling you there's something here to read in the present. Now, it may not be literally what your mind tells you it is, but it's something, right? Mm-hmm. If we go and we push that aside, we eventually become dumb enough that we don't even know what we feel. Yeah. It's a kind of ignorance called alexithymia. I can't tell you what I feel. Don't know how it's differentiated, et cetera. Mm-hmm. What does that predict? It predicts bad outcomes everywhere we go. It predicts you marrying the wrong person, taking the wrong job, going into the wrong environment. Why? Because it'd be like a person deliberately, having leprosy so that you couldn't feel anything in your fingers. Right. If you had a pain in your finger, that cost is too high. If you have a pain in your history that gives rise to, let's say, feeling anxious around others, it probably connects to how important others are. Yeah. It probably connects to a history where sometimes you made mistakes or where things were done to you that were abusive or unsafe. You want to read that. You don't want it dominating your life. Mm-hmm. But that's a gift, dude. That's as much a gift as the gift of the feeling in your fingers and your ability to do things with fine, you don't want to be a leper. Where the necrotic process, people get their hands in the fire and don't even take it out because they don't know it. They lose their fingers, literally, because they're accidentally putting them in the car door and stuff like that. In the same way, metaphorically, You know, we put ourselves into places that don't bring us prosperity because we can't read it. And so in women, for example, alexithymia predicts a future of domestic violence and sexual abuse. It means you're going home with guys who are unsafe.
Yeah.
It means you're marrying people who are not safe. Well, why? Because you can't read it. So I'm sorry for going on these long rants. Yeah. You're at my heart, man. You're asking me questions that are so close to things I deeply care about.
You know, I don't want to take
this is not knowing. So acceptance is not tolerance. It's receiving the gift.
I love that, and I just unfortunately, maybe this takes us down one of those other tangents, but I just got to ask or bring it up for a second just to see what your reply would be on this. Where you just went in terms of the alexithymia, not really understanding what it is that we feel and all of the different things that it's linked to. I'll be honest, the thing that pops into my head is the increasing research around the importance of social emotional awareness, especially through adolescence and into early adulthood, for exactly what you're describing. And I mean, it just seems to bear out so extraordinarily tightly with why social emotional awareness is showing all of this research as to why it is so critically fundamentally important for the long-term health and well-being and mental well-being, emotional well-being, et cetera, of our children becoming adults.
Well, and we're giving them such bad guidance. You know, the places we used to learn that small amounts of pain linked to a purpose is actually a positive thing, or that's backing up from judgment, noticing that judgment there and coming back in the environment and focus on what you really care about and getting your feet moving towards that. Those kinds of things. We're in our wisdom traditions, our spiritual traditions, our community and group traditions, and all those things have dampened down. And instead we got, you know, a culture that's saying, if you have the trophy house and the trophy spouse, you know, if you get a whole lot of likes, you know, on your social media and stuff, then that, and meanwhile, you know, a constant flow of exposure to horror. I mean, I'm old enough to remember you couldn't put a picture of a dead soldier in the Vietnam War in the New York Times. It was like controversial because now you can see people shot live. Yeah. You can see any horror around the world on the screen you got in your pocket. Yeah. By the way, you can also see a constant flow of judgment. I mean, turn on the news program, and I don't care which flavor you pick, right or left. Still there. It's a constant flow of judgment. Yeah. And so what we're telling our kids is that if you can just have the right things, and if you can get the right applause, and if you can, it's not true. It's never been true. Yeah. There's no culture who has a wisdom tradition, and we all have wisdom traditions, that ever said something so stupid as we find presented on our screens to our children and our adolescents. And so, you know, it's not surprising. Look at the suicide rate. This isn't just people saying, oh yeah, I'm more anxious. Do you know that your kids are a standard deviation, you know, a measure of how much, a big chunk, a significant chunk, more anxious, depressed, and distressed than they were 30 years ago. Yeah. And if you want to say that, oh, that's just because now people talk about it. No, dude, we're talking about actual deaths on things like overdose and deliberate suicide, or we're talking about non-suicidal self-injury. We're talking about people burning and binging and purging and, you know, things that, you know, my wife and I did a study with college students, 18-year-olds coming in, full clinical interviews, full diagnostic, full thing, 4,000 kids, traced over 4 years. You know, and the data are enough to make you want to cry. These are the successful kids walking into a pretty decent mid-major university. Yeah. And, you know, 18, 20% of them are already diagnosable with significant mental behavioral health problems. And then you look at their trajectories. Yeah. All kinds of problems get worse, not better, even while you're being educated. No, and what predicts it? Psychological flexibility. If you come in inflexible, you're in trouble. If you follow people's trajectories over time, you're going to get increasing trouble. If you have anxiety, depression, substance use, you have one problem when you come in, you're going to have 2, 3 problems when you leave. Yeah. You know, and you're something like 40, 50, 60% of our problems that we're struggling with now at our age, well, I'm a lot older than you, Luke, but you're not 18, started when you were in that cusp of late adolescence and early adulthood.
Yeah.
So these trajectories, we're going to be dealing with the young listeners to our program. When they're old people, they're going to be dealing with the social costs of the train wreck that we produced by not educating our young people to be more emotionally open, more cognitively flexible, more mindful, and in the space where they can allocate attention based on what's of importance, and more connected to their values and able to keep their feet moving direction of their values, not just running away and trying to feel good as a way of living well. And I hope we can create modern minds for this modern world, because the world our children are exposed to is more challenging than the one that was 30 years ago. You have more pain and judgment and social comparison than by orders of magnitude just by the computer in your pocket.
Absolutely. Let's talk about some of the psychological flexibility, because that's what enables us to make some of the types of commitments to what really truly matters for ourselves, to our values and things like that. First, define psychological flexibility for us. Let's start there.
It's a combination of 6 things, and it's being able to show up to your thoughts and feelings that are happening in the present without them being dominated or you having to quickly run away or change them, but being aware of your own thoughts and feelings as a conscious human being, as this part of you that's able to witness and observe what's happening, as a person who's mindful in the moment, and then being able to allocate attention based on what's of importance in the world inside and out, to focus on your values, what you really want to put into your life's moments, the qualities of being and doing that you want to put out there in the behavioral choices you make, and then build habits and patterns of values-based action in your life, where larger and larger habits of your and larger components of what you do every day are linked to what you deeply care about, and not to running away or putting on a social show. So it's being here now as a conscious human being, open to what your thoughts, feelings, memory, and bodily sensations are giving you, but with a little sense of perspective and space, and being able to focus on your values and get your behavior linked to it.
And what, part of what I also hear in this is it's an understanding that when any circumstance of life is coming at us in a manner in which it might evoke stress for us, is that when we go down that path of a stress response of any magnitude, in some fashion, our flexibility, our open-mindedness is going to start closing and narrowing, and it's going to start getting much more limited and not being able to see all of maybe the possibilities that exist there, let alone maybe even things we've already chosen as important to ourselves. And so what you're describing is the way in which we can meet, receive, accept those experiences, the emotions that are arising based on those experiences, so that we can gain a little bit more of that space, and we can take a look at, okay, where do we actually want to go? What are the options and possibilities on the table? And specifically, how can I connect those to the things I have done the work to say, these are the things that are most important to me. So how can I start moving in that direction? And it's maintaining the flexibility to do that. Would that be a...
Yeah, I would say I would 100% with you. I want to do a little thing around the word stress, though, because what the data show is stress is a combination of psychological, physiological challenges, and in a mindset or in a posture of this is too much or no.
Yes.
You just take it down to the word no. There's a little piece in there. So so you take something like, for example, what we're doing right now. What you and I are doing right now, I guarantee our underlying neurophysiology and the rest of our body is hyped up a little bit because we're doing something of importance. This is not stressful. This is cool.
Yeah.
I mean, this is life. This is contribution. This is being able to reach people and help people and do something that's worthy of our life's moments. Yeah. If you were to measure just my heart rate or et cetera, what you'd see is responses that physiologically are very close to the early parts of a stress response when you resist it, but without the counter reactions that actually are going to create both physical and psychological harm. So if you go in the flow with a challenging moment in a sports competition, in a leadership situation, in a social situation, or a psychologically a challenging task, you get into the flow with that, and the same challenges flip from stressful to what you would probably say is not stressful,
Yeah.
but not because it's any less of a challenge,
Yeah.
but just because you stopped adding this kind of dirty process of that's too much, I can't have this little mental no.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people are saying things like, oh, I'm just too stressed, I got to go meditate, or whatever, I'm saying, dude, yeah, I'm with you, go meditate, but don't just run from this situation. Let's just see if we can find the place where a challenge turned into stress and flip the switch.
Yeah.
And a challenge then can be something that is life enhancing and aspirational, that can lift you up and vitalize you. And is your heart rate picking up? Is your body getting mobilized? Yeah. And what does it feel like? It feels like, yeah. It doesn't feel like, oh no. And so the stress conversation, if we can just do that little tweak, I'm 100% down with.
Love it.
I've seen it turn into the, I need to live my life smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, because as I get bigger, it gets more stressful.
Yeah.
That's a little trick of mind. That's not necessary.
Well, it's again, not to digress, but it's the same as, when you are physically working out, you are stressing your body, but you're doing so in a very positive anabolic type of manner for growth, for generation, for building. It's very constructive. And you're just same type of thing, right? Is that stress, meaning any situation that presents that little challenge or big challenge to us, is how are we looking at it? How are we viewing it? How are we meeting it? How are we embracing it? Because we're going to have very different responses based off of that.
Exactly. Exactly right.
One of the things,
that includes, by the way, some of these emotions that you immediately, it doesn't just stress, that includes anxiety, that includes sadness, that includes, your mind's going to know if I do this with groups sometimes where I say, okay, you can only say good or bad. And I'll say some words, and I'll say happy, they say good. And I say sad, they say bad. And anxious, they say bad. And joyful, they say good. Then I say, okay, I got a call that my mother had made a negative turn inside day 2 of a bout of pneumonia. And I ran to Southwest, and I got on the plane, and I flew down to Phoenix, and I got there just in time to watch about a 5-hour process of my mom dying. And her feet turned black and her breath spaced out, and finally the last breath never came. That was it. Was that sad? Everybody say yes. I say, I'll tell you what, that was intensely sad. I loved my mom, and watching her die was intensely sad. I said, and that's bad, right? I shouldn't have felt sad about that. And they say, oh, no. I said, what are you talking about? You just said bad. I heard you. I said sad. You said bad. Yeah. And that's how stupid the organ is in our minds. Yeah. It's a judgment organ. It's a problem-solving organ. I'm glad I've got it. I don't want to be my little dog, Georgie. But don't be letting that dictator within with its evaluative processes turn your own healthy body, psychological, emotional, cognitive processes into this cartoon version that a healthy life is something that only has, for example, the good emotions and not the bad emotions, when the fact is you need them all in certain circumstances and to certain degrees. And your mind doesn't get that. It'll go sad, bad. And it'll be dampened down on sad when, man, it's time to be sad. This is a time to be sad. Something really, you got that news, your friend died or whatever. And so same thing with that stress deal. Challenges well met are not what we're talking about, even though physiologically they're stressful, but life-wise they're enhancing.
Let's talk about just 2 of these flexibility processes, because one in particular, which you're highlighting right now, and you're highlighting several, but one in particular has been just, I will say, very much transformational for me, is that difference between experiential avoidance and experiential acceptance.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit on that, because this to me is like one of those, also the gateways into flexibility is when we stop avoiding and we move towards the acceptance piece, because it just opens up a whole range of things that we probably never even saw were possible within our lives.
It's pivotal, and because it opens up, not just greater emotional openness, but it opens up caring, because we hurt where we care and we care where we hurt. You think about it, the things that you really, really want, the things you really, really care about, those are the places where you can be hurt, right? So if you're not open, so experiential avoidance is this tendency to artificially try to reduce the frequency, the appearance of it, or the situations in which it happens, of some kind of emotion, sensation, memory, or reaction. And acceptance is that process of to be able to be with the moment by moment sensation, emotion, memory process in such a way that it's part of your life without dominating your behavior. You notice it, you see it, you feel it, and then you can make that choice of what do I do with that? And sometimes that means going into it and understanding it more. Sometimes it means something more like, check, Roger, got it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it means almost eventually, okay, well, that's fine, and I'm turning to this other thing. For example, I've got ringing in my ears really loud. It's a bad idea to be a punk rocker and stand in front of 30-foot tall speakers that are kicking out 160 to 170 decibels of sound. Yep. Note to listeners, if you've got your little iPhone there with whatever with the ear things in, keep the volume down, because when you're 71, what you hear is ringing from 24/7. But there's nothing for me to learn about that. I actually went through a process where I had to get down to the point of having the thought, like, if I shoot myself, the sound will go away. And then I kind of had the thought, dude, apply your life's work to it. It took me 3 years to get there, and it took me like 2 days to solve it. 100% solved. Yeah. And that kind of openness looks more like, okay, next lifetime I won't stand in front of the speakers. It looks more like disinterest or boredom. Yeah. But often it looks like deliberately feeling things, like taking time to feel sad about your mom dying.
Yeah.
And sometimes it feels like, check, got it, and then roll, like the little twinge of anxiety you feel before you do something like what you and I are doing right now. Yeah. That's a little thing saying something's at stake here. That's important. So experiential acceptance allows you then to have the information of your past to have a positive role in your life. And that empowers you to be able to turn towards where you care, instead of having to first get rid of all the negative emotions before you have permission to live, which is what your mind is trying to do to you.
One of the things that I just want to add in here, because I've heard you speak about this in the past, and I see this as such a part of that pivot from avoidance to acceptance, is the difference of kind of the way that we view discomfort and the willingness that we also have, right? So yeah. we're gonna encounter discomfort in every average day that we go through in life. We're gonna have discomfort at any number of different levels. But the way in which we build our willingness and make a commitment to the willingness to turn towards that discomfort is what creates the openness to pivot actually all the way to the point of acceptance and embracing and receiving, and the beautiful way that you put it there of using and merging our past, not so it dictates our future, but simply to inform and to be able to look around.
I can give your listeners an example that they can test themselves really, really fast. If they just look around the environment they're in, find something to focus on, anything, and then get yourself in a no posture. Criticize it, find out what's wrong with it, note the flaws in it, emphasize how it's really doesn't belong there. You wish it would go away. Get yourself into a full no with that object. I mean, you can probably find something wrong with it. I bet you. Yeah. Anything. Don't pick a human being, by the way. It's not kind to do it. Pick an object. Now do the same thing, same exact, but now flip it into a yes. Yeah. Yes, that belongs here. Yes, that's cool. Yes, that's just like that. I mean, even like if you're looking at like, oh man, that light is kind of like, well, that's so 1970s. Yeah. I'm looking at one right now. It's the house, which is so 1970s. But as I flip it, it's like, wow, is that 1970s? Like it's so elegantly, perfectly 1970s. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So in the same way, So what would happen if you just went through your life's moments, but you just try it out for like 15 minutes, whereas things show up, the places where you have literally kind of flinch and defend and go, no, where your body literally almost gets in this posture and kind of bring your head up, open your eyes, put your arms out and do a yes with it.
Yeah.
And just see what happens to the range of things that are now possible with you with the same event. Your mind's telling you it has to change because it's harmful. It plays this harmful role. No, it's an interaction. Yeah. You gave it that role in part by the posture you brought to that life moment. You changed the posture, you change its impact. Yeah. You haven't changed its form, but you've changed its function. And that one's up to you. So it's a message of responsibility, but it's a message of freedom.
Yeah.
You get to choose.
It's a wonderful illustration of it. I wanted to just touch on one other of the flexibility processes before we just kind of move on and then begin to wrap up, because I think it's, again, another critical one is cognitive diffusion as opposed to cognitive fusion. And I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about this, because again, this is one of those areas that you can watch, like you said, watch the news, watch anything that's going on out there, and you're going to see this at work.
Well, diffusion is our made-up word. It's not in the dictionary for. Right. It comes from the Latin word root of the word fusion, which is to pour together. And from the word meaning to pour, like lemonade. You know, it's really hard to kind of separate out the ingredients of lemonade. Mm-hmm. And when you have a normal thought, the ingredients are all mixed in, like what the thought refers to or says it is. You know, like that's a bad cup, and you'll miss that. You know, if you weren't there, the cup would still be there, but bad would have disappeared. That's in you and your interaction with the cup. That's not in the freaking cup. But language doesn't let you make that discrimination easily. And so we have a whole range of methods that you would get a number of them just through contemplative practice, mindfulness work, etc. But we really had fun with it and building out literally hundreds of methods that are little micro methods, things you can do in a matter of seconds that sort of pop the illusion of literal meaning, that take what your mind's given you as being so and true and in the world, and instead you notice that it's in your judgment and evaluation of the world, and you begin to look at your thoughts, not from your thoughts. That little gap of looking at your thoughts and at your judgments allows you choice. When you're just dealing with the world structured by your thoughts, you don't seem to have choice. You know, like, this is bad, this is unacceptable, this sucks, etc. There's no choice in there. I'm having the thought, this is bad. I'm having the thought, this sucks. That gives you a little gap. In fact, there's an example. Just put in, I'm having the thought that, when you have a thought. I'm having the feeling that, when you're having a feeling. I'm having the sensation of, when you're having a sensation. Just do it mentally. Don't do it out loud. It's too weird. People will look at you funny. Do it mentally. Or with somebody who knows the game and is willing to play with you. You can play with socially. I do it in therapy. We've had people literally, you know, in fMRI kind of studies, we're looking at how the brain lights up when you're having a thought like I'm bad versus I'm having the thought I'm bad. Your brain lights up completely differently, and it dominates over you. So if I give you just a couple more quick examples so that people can play with it. And there is another TEDx talk of mine. Can I give you the links? They're really easy.
Yeah, we'll put them into the show notes.
Okay, awesome. I won't take the time to say them out, but I've got a little bit.ly link for them, both of them.
Excellent.
The second one is on these the TEDx talk is on these diffusion methods, and I have about 12 of them, and they're little micro methods. I'll just mention a couple of them. Give your mind a name, and then when it's speaking to you, thank whatever that name is for what it is, and notice whatever that name is has to say. So my mind's name is George. If you think this, you don't want to come up with a name, call it Mr. or Ms. Mind. Okay.
Yep.
And so when you're thinking something, well, what does George have to say about that? That's fine. We want to have a mind telling us stuff.
Yeah.
But that little gap gives us choice. It isn't up to our automatic verbal processes that are programmed so easily. If I say Mary had a little, you're thinking lamb, dude. There's no way you're thinking anything else. And even if you tried to put something else in there, like Mary had a little dress, you'd have, had a little dress, not a lamb. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right.
Your history doesn't go away. There's no eraser in the nervous system. There's none short of brain injury.
Yeah.
So, you know, give your mind a name and notice what it has to say. If you want to get more playful with it, take a thought that is dominating you and have that mind with that name, give it to you in the voice of your least favorite politician or your most favored cartoon character or anything like that. And then it's gonna land differently. You may be having a thought like I'm a failure, but if it comes in the form of I'm a failure, it's not gonna land the same way. And you're not trying to eliminate the thought. You're not trying to erase it. You're just trying to remind yourself that's a thought. Who knows where it was programmed from? It could have been a critical parent. It could have been something you saw on TV. You know, Mary had a little, you know, you're programmed, things will show up. Okay, but your programming is not you. That's part of you. It's within you, you want that. But you get to choose, this is your life. This is not, you know, mechanical connection, robot mind's life. You're not a robot, you're a human being.
Absolutely. The analogy I love using for everybody is, you know, when we are associated with our thoughts, when we're coming at life from our thoughts and everything is fused, it's like walking around in our own movie, right? So this mind is the greatest cinematographer that ever existed. It does the story writing, it does everything, right? So we've got the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations, all the cues that are sensory around us. And it feels like we are in it. And what you're describing and all the diffusion techniques are that moment where we remember it's a movie.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Okay, we're back. Okay, well, what does the director see? What does the writer see? What does the guy holding the microphone see? And
it would be almost like if you're watching a movie and down in the corner is the movie of the people who made the movie.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And it's sometimes okay. I mean, it's okay when it's safe. Like when you go to the movies or you buy a novel to enter into a fused state, entertaining. You know, you create a safe environment. Not a good idea to watch an entertaining movie on the screen while you're driving your car.
Exactly.
You know, you got other things to attend to. In a movie theater, cool. Absolutely cool. When you're reading a book, cool. When you're trying to create something like you and I are creating right now, and you've got some movies playing that are about your past failures or what you're afraid might happen or how you're going to be judged by others or what a fool you're making of yourself, this might be the time to notice there's another film going on here of the movie maker and notice that and then make some choices about what kind of movie do you want to make now. If this next moment was one where you get to author it, you get to make the movie, not the characters you don't know, but the theme of it. Are you writing a hero's journey or are you writing a tragedy? What kind of movie do you want to have your life be about? You don't get to decide what happens. You might get a cancer diagnosis tomorrow, but you do get to decide what it means. Is that going to be a story of resilience? Is that going to be a story of, you know, facing life's challenges and really making a difference? Is this going to be a story of love and connection and contribution and creativity? Or are you going to write the story of the tragedy of a life not lived? And what if that's up to you? And by the way, it is. Don't let that turn and be a guilt, shame, and fame thing. Your mind will do that. Oh, therefore you're, no, dude. That's just another automatic, Mary had a little. No, show up to your authorship and the possibility of choosing what brings meaning and purpose into your life as a whole human being carrying all of your history with you. And man, life's got like a banquet in front of you, even if you're dealing with cancer. We have studies showing, do ACT training with people who have had serious bouts with cancer. And what happens? Post-traumatic growth. They start making calls to their friends. They start caring more about their spirituality. They start, attending to their children and to the love that's around them and taking time to express gratitude and to connect with others. Will that guarantee that you're not leaving life inside this bout of cancer? No, we're all leaving life horizontal, dude. But can we have the moments that we're given be about what we deeply care about instead of what we're afraid of? Can we create a movie that is a hero's journey? Yeah, we can do that. And no subtraction, no delete button, no erasure. Taking the whole of you right now forward. So that's my message to people. And it turns out that some of the things we've learned in psychotherapy, man, they apply to things like cancer and diet and exercise, but not just that. They apply to things like sports and recreation and being a good chess player and writing a great novel and dealing with stigma and prejudice and creating cooperation in your work environment. These processes follow everywhere a human mind goes. And if people are interested, I hope they explore it. If there's something in here that resonated or connected, there's a whole community, there's a vast set of resources. We're not about, squeezing people into a little funnel and you have to like tithe to get wisdom or something. You'll see it everywhere for free, but chase it. It's out there, and it'll lift you up if you're suffering, and it'll empower you if you're looking to create meaning and purpose in your life.
Stephen, I really appreciate you coming here on One Idea Way, sharing just the incredible expertise, the wisdom, the journey you've been on, because I know everybody listening is getting just a tremendous benefit from this. I really appreciate it.
I hope so. And we'll leave some links out there. And but even beyond that, just a little time on your search engine or wherever you can find what's out there, and acceptance and commitment therapy and psychological flexibility, and a wonderful human community over the last 30 years that created something that brings something of new value that resonates deeply with our wisdom traditions and stuff. Of course, it's not really new, but it's been put through Western science in a way that now we can bring it in a way where, mindfulness and contemplation, but also, really goofy stuff that all the, seeing deeply to how the process works would allow us to put things into our environment that you can, or into our world that you can do in 20 seconds. And that'll, bump you forward and give you a little space to be more the true person that you really are.
I think it's just the beauty of this. Once again, thank you, because I just think the beauty of what we're seeing emerge right now is the very fact that there's this intersection occurring between wisdom, whether we call that the wisdom traditions and then some of the Eastern traditions, but wisdom in general of things that have been the pursuits for a fulfilling life, for a happy life, for a connected life that we've been pursuing for 2,500 years. And it's becoming intertwined, right? It's becoming intertwined with the science, and it's becoming, intertwined with the understandings that we now have of how the brain works and how our psychology functions, our minds function. And it's all beginning to start to reveal there are some universal patterns that are there that make life that little bit easier, that little bit more rewarding, that little bit more fulfilling. And when we do that over time, it really adds up and accumulates to a full life, to a deeper life, to a more conscious life, and one that we can just have great satisfaction with when we do arrive at our final breath. And so,
yeah, that's exactly right. And if I could just put a point on it, this is not just Eastern. This is all of our wisdom traditions.
Yes.
And it's art and it's literature. I mean, wisdom is out there and it's been there for eons. What's different is we now finally are coming together, getting to those core processes, bringing Western science to it too. We had a place for that, not in a way that reduces and minimizes, but in a way that appreciates human complexity and empowers people. And that combination, neuroscience, psychological science, wisdom traditions, art and literature, man, that's a powerful combination. And I hope what you've heard in here with this psychological flexibility thing is that it's not one size fits all. It's the smallest set of processes that sort of summarize a big chunk of what we all have learned and known in our human journey, not just individually, but as a human species. So time's up. We need modern minds for this modern world we've created.
Absolutely. So for everybody, one of the things I'd love to encourage you to be able to do is that after this interview, do me a favor, go on to Amazon or one of the online bookstores, wherever you're going to go, or even go into one of the stores. Coming up soon is Stephen's latest book, A Liberated Mind. And it dives so much deeper into this journey, into the psychological flexibility processes. It allows you to continue learning this process. As always, I thank you for tuning in with us. And until next time, continue to enjoy the journey. Thank you. Check out IPEC's coach training program at ipeccoaching.com/OIA. And of course, to find out about all the conversations, events, gatherings, all the things that we've got upcoming, then head on over to oneideaaway.com/community. Thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have, please do us the favor of subscribing, reviewing the show, as well as sharing insights or comments that stood out for you in this episode.